Alright, today we're going to learn another method for slab building a vessel. I'm going to show you how to make a slab built cup, but this method could be adapted to make a bowl or make any type of shape. What you're going to need is a slab. I like a slab that's on the thinner side, so between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch, but it's up to you. If working with a very thin slab feels difficult, you can make that. You can go up to 1/4 inch and work with it there. As you get practice, you'll find that your skill improves and you can work with a little bit more challenging clay. I'm going to use some paper for templates. You can just use regular old copy paper. I have some roofing paper that I've made into templates. I have a template for the bottom, but I'll also show you a trick for cutting the bottom to match your cup exactly. So this is a template that was adapted from one a friend gave me, and as you can see, it's cut on a curve like this. So when I attach it, I can either have this inverted shape, or I can have a cup that comes open, kind of like a pint glass or something like that. I have this shorter version, so same thing, this kind of inverted or like fluted shape or an inverted shape. This is just a piece of copy paper that I cut to be 5 inches by 10 inches, and so you can see when I combine it, I get a pretty straight up and down cylinder. So as you are preparing your set, you can play around with paper, sketch by cutting paper, and decide what shape vessel you want. Alright, I've rolled my slab. I have ribbed both sides to compress it, and now I'm going to get started. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out my templates. Okay, looks like I can get these two out. I'm going to use my needle tool to cut these out. The roofing paper is nice because it doesn't get soggy as I work. Another trick, if you find a template that you really like, is to just cover it on both sides with packing tape. It's like the poor man's lamination. But you can also get roofing paper at Home Depot for a very low cost. Alright, so get my slabs cut out. I'm going to get rid of the extra. I'm going to set these on a piece of drywall just long enough to roll out another slab and cut my bottoms off. Because I'm going to need to put these into the shape of a cup, I don't want them to get too set up before I do that. Okay, now that I've got my slab that is going to make my bottoms, I'm going to take my slabs that will make the sides of my cylinder. I'm going to take my slabs that will become the sides of the cylinder, and very gently, supporting them with my hands, I'm going to pick them up and start to bring them into a circle shape or into a cylinder shape on top of my slab. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with my other cylinder, and again, I'm being very careful to not let any of the sides bend by supporting with my whole hands. Okay, so I'm going to put this on here, get that shape. I'm going for a very nice round circle. You can use a template or you can eyeball it. I like to eyeball it. Alright, and now I'm going to cut around my cylinders. I'm going to cut just a hair on the outside of the circle, and then I'm going to let all of the slabs set up. You cut a little extra, you can always trim it later. Better to have a little extra than not enough. So as you learned from working with your hard slab, Once these slabs get stiff, then they can run the risk of cracking if you bend them, so that's why we're bending these now. We're going to set them aside on drywall or your board and let them get to a soft leather hard stage. Okay, we're back. So I've got my bottoms and my cylinders, and as you can see, they're supporting themselves. They've set up to the point where they're supporting themselves. They're still a little plastic. Because I'm working with this curve, I don't want to work with them past this point, because even if they're still leather hard, working with them will cause stress on this area and I could get a crack. So these are just set up enough to support themselves, and this is where I'm going to be doing all of the construction. So I like to use my fettling knife, or this is my small knife, and I like to bevel these edges. So I will cut one this way and the other one this way. I'm just cutting a little off so you'll be able to see. So let me show you. So I bevel the outside of the one edge and the inside of the other edge. I'm going to do that all the way down, and that gives me more surface area to scratch and score and attach. So let me go ahead and finish that. So I'm moving it out just so enough that I can access it away from the other piece, but again, I don't want to move this a lot because I will cause a lot of stress. And just like when we did our slab project, this bevel does not need to be perfect. We're going to be scratching and scoring, and that will flatten that corner out, but we just want to get rid of the sharp edge. Okay. So that's what it looks like now. Alright, so now I'm going to scratch and score on the inside of this beveled edge, and then on the outside here, and that's going to overlap. The fork is perfect for this. The needle tool will work, it will just take longer. I'm going to use this cool tool that I got at Clay Art Center because I don't have a fork here. Okay, so I'm going to scratch and score along the both flat beveled edges. And again, I want to do really good cross hatching. I'm just opening this just enough to get into the bevel. Okay, scratch and score. Okay. Now I'm going to place a piece of paper under my cylinder just so that it doesn't get sticky and stick to the board I'm working on, or if it does, I can easily remove it. I'm going to add just a little bit of water, just enough to fill in those nooks and crannies. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and press these pieces together. It's going to Velcro. If it's difficult to reach the bottom of the cylinder, I can use a tool on the inside to help press these together, or I can flip my cylinder over and then I can reach in with my hand and I can reach all the way. Okay, so now using a tool to support on the inside, I'm going to use a tool to support on the inside. I'm going to use a metal rib to compress, to firmly press, and to help make the seam disappear. And then on the inside, using my wooden knife, I'm going to just gently smooth this seam. Just like with our slab boxes, if you need to wrap it overnight before you get all of that seam smoothed away, that's fine. You can come back to it. But again, we want to keep working. So now I'm going to use my bottom. My cylinder is done. I'm going to put it on here and center it really well. I'm going to use my needle tool to trace the inside, so the inside of the cylinder. That looks like this when it's done. And now I'm going to scratch and score the bottom of the cylinder and everything outside of that line. Another time where I like to have a piece of paper underneath. I'm going to add water, again just enough to fill in all the nooks and crannies, not enough that it's spilling over too much. Alright, so now I'm going to flip it onto here, and I'm going to use my guide on the inside to center it. Okay, when I feel like it's in place, I'm going to give it a little tap. That's how we know it's Velcroed. I'm gonna give it a little smooth. The last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use a pretty dry brush. So it was in water, but I just took all the water off, and I'm just gonna run that around the inside. If you have a brush with like a shape like this, that works really well too. Just making sure there's not too much water. You don't want to introduce a bunch of water that's going to sit in your pot overnight. But I'm just cleaning up that little bit of edge. And if you don't get it perfectly clean, you know, it's okay. You can go back a little later. I'm just giving it a little swipe with my brush. Now, see that little seam there, so I'm going to clean it up a little. This I'm going to put in plastic overnight, and when I take it out, I'm going to trim the bottom, and then once it's leather hard, it's ready to decorate. As always, I can sponge or pinch this edge or anything I want to make it fit my design better. Alright, it's 24 hours later. I'm going to trim this cup, and then I will be ready to decorate it. So I am going to take a peek at the inside. You can still see a bit of that seam, so I'm going to use a tool like your wooden knife, and this little rounded part will work well for just helping that seam disappear. Okay. I also just use this brush a little bit. Okay. Last thing I'm going to do is just give it a quick sponge. Just giving it a little sponge. It will mostly disappear. Same on the outside. Okay. I'll give that just all a sponge at the end to make sure it's all done. Now I'm going to use my fettling knife, and I'm going to trim this. Now, how you angle your knife is important, because if you trim with your knife angled in, you're going to end up with a bottom that's actually smaller than your cylinder. So I like to angle my knife out at just like not even 45 degrees, but so as I'm trimming, I get just a little bit of a lip versus having it dip in underneath the cylinder. So I'm going to go ahead and do that all the way around. What will happen is as we're decorating and we're sponging, a lot of that will disappear. Okay. Now I'm just going to take one more peek, and if there's anything sticking out, like if my angle was too wide, I'm just going to trim that off. But just take care to not have your angle be too narrow, whatever the right word would be, from the start, because it's hard to put the clay back. Although the nice thing about clay is that you can put it back. Alright, so now I'm going to just give this a sponge. I would say my sponge is like, it's not dripping, but it has a good amount of moisture in it. And I'm just firmly sponging this. The reason we didn't do it before wrapping it in plastic for the night is because we would have just started to sponge away that moisture clay where it had just been constructed, as you can imagine. Okay. So I'm doing a pretty firm sponge. I am like anywhere where it was sticking out just a bit, I'm bringing it in now, and that's going to give me, you'll see in 1 second, cleaning up that seam a little. It's going to give me just a little bit of a feeling of like a foot down here. Now I could make this less noticeable, or I could make it super noticeable depending on what my design theme is. But there you go. I'm going to let this get a little bit harder, soft leather hard. I'm going to sponge off any of these little sticky fingerprints, and then I'm going to decide how I'm going to decorate and finish it.